Today our session is going to be on ward rounds, and I would like to invite Dr. Jis to conduct the session on the ward rounds. Sir, over to you, sir.
Good evening, everyone. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
So, as usual, I'm coming. Supposed to be another person today, but somehow he has got some problems. That's why I barged in. But definitely, we'll utilize this time, 1 hour, for your betterment. So this is one area you may not be exposed now because ward rounds. I'm sure that if you are going to have a DNB exam very soon, less likely they will take you around through the ward because of the problems of COVID and other pandemic related issues. But definitely this is very important for you. So we are having a FAT exam tomorrow in the EMC, the DNB FAT exam. So what we have planned is that we will put some questions in the OSCE form and show it to the students, and we'll conduct a post-session of the ward. So that's what I am going to share with you. Okay, so shall we start? Okay. So we have almost 30 participants. I want it to be more interactive as possible.
Hello.
Yeah. So we'll start. Ward rounds is basically what the examiner wants is that to know whether you have worked in the ward and you know the routine things happening with the ward. So it is not something you will be asked about a lot of theoretical questions. And I have seen many examiners, especially the older generation, likes to know how much you know about the history of the orthopedics. So you can expect a lot of questions in that perspective. So it's not a area where you will be asked the recent advances and other things. It's basically the techniques which you use in daily hospital, wound care, dressing, the plaster applications, the splints, and about the different type of surgical infections, things like that. Okay, so we'll move on to the first question. So I will ask this. I'm not sure whether we should stick to the final years, but if anybody wants, even from the first year or second year, they can answer this question. So we'll go on to the first question. So it's a simple question. Johnson, can you answer this? What is this? Johnson, what are you seeing here?
Sir, yeah, plaster of Paris, sir.
It's a plaster of Paris. So you have got 1 mark for that. Okay, good. Yeah. So it's a plaster of Paris. So you want to add some adjective to it. The normal plaster of Paris doesn't look like this, no?
Roll, sir.
The plaster of Paris roll, or anybody wants to add something to it? Pratik, you want to help Johnson? Pratik, what are you seeing here? Is it just a plaster of Paris, or is it something specific?
Sir, can we see first generation Gibsona cast?
What do you say?
First generation Gibsona cast.
Okay. It's a cast.
What's the cast material? POP material.
So that's why. So when you have an OSCE, so if you write plaster of Paris, you will be given half mark. But the half mark you will be missing out because it's not just plaster of Paris. It is not a lump of plaster of Paris. Hemant Kumar, you want to say something about it? What is it exactly? Okay. So without, we'll move on to the next part then. Okay, we'll leave it that there. We'll come back again. So, okay, Johnson, what is the chemical reaction happens when you dip a plaster inside the water?
Sir, I think, sir, when water is added to it, sir, there will be heat will be generated and will be crystallization.
Excellent.
Like the gypsum will be converted to hemi-gypsum, sir. It will lose its
Yeah, so hemi gypsum will convert to full gypsum. It's not losing water. It's we are adding water, no. So it's half H2O to become say 2H2O. Yeah, that's right. So it's not hemi. It's becoming hemi. From hemi it becomes a 2H2O. Okay, then what happens? After the heat is generated, it becomes crystallized and it becomes dried up. Okay, so there is a process of crystallization, and that time you have to be very careful. So some examiners may like to ask you, okay, so what are the factors affect the setting time? Setting time is the time it becomes hardened up.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, the humidity and the temperature of water.
Okay, so by changing the temperature of the water, definitely that's what we normally do. You normally keep some warm water so it sets very fast. If it's cold, it takes more time. So that's one changing the chemical. Is there any other way? There are many ways. Any other way?
The humidity and also depends upon the impurities in the cast.
Okay. Yeah. Good. Then?
Surrounding temperature also, sir.
Yeah. So temperature we have already discussed. So it's a surrounding temperature, temperature of the water, temperature of the periphery, humidity, all those comes in just temperature. Okay. Anybody? Hemant Kumar? Hemant? So the problem with this is that these questions the examiner expect every student to know. If you make a mistake, because the plaster of Paris is a thing which we use almost every day in our OPD due to some specific reasons. Okay, Hemant Kumar, is there any other way you can change the setting time? So another way is by putting some saline. Okay, so salinity of the water actually increases the setting time or decreases the setting time. So not only just heat, adding a bit of salt also helps to set it faster. So we have discussed that it is a advantage of the plaster of Paris. Okay, the chemical reaction we have already discussed. It is to half H2O becoming a hydration. It is more of a hydration that helps in crystallizing. And Pavan, can you say 4 complications which you can see with plaster applications? So you have to remind every patient after application. You have to be careful about this. Okay. Pavan Rao?
Joint stiffness.
Okay, very good. So that's you can warn them that okay, once you apply a plaster, there is a chance that the joint immobilized can get stiff. So you have to move the adjacent joints at least so that the stiffness of the adjacent joints are at least reduced. Okay, then
compartment syndrome.
Yeah, very good, very good. So if the pressure increases, there is a chance that the compartment syndromes can set in. So if there is an increased pain or something, you must come back immediately because there is a chance of compartment syndrome. Okay, what else?
Chronic regional pain syndrome.
What do you say?
Chronic regional pain syndrome.
Okay, chronic regional pain syndrome is not just because of the plaster, it's because of the trauma itself. Because the trauma is the primary reason. It can be a minor trauma or associated with nerve injury or without nerve injury. That's how you classify CRPS, complex regional pain syndrome. But by plaster application alone, the CRPS may not set in, but it may aggravate because of the stiffness. Okay, that's nice. Okay, what else?
Allergy, cast allergy.
Yes. So some people are allergic to these things. So you have to make sure that you should not directly apply this. You should have some like a cotton padding or something underneath or some stock in it. So it will not allow the plaster. So it's very rare, but most of the so this is one of the reasons. It is less allergenic. It's easy to mold and adapt to the surroundings, and it is radio opaque or radio lucent.
Radio opaque.
It's radio opaque. So you cannot, once you put a plaster, you cannot take an X-ray and see. Abhijit?
Sir, it's radiolucent.
So it's radiolucent, but definitely it is not as radiolucent as a synthetic cast. Okay, but definitely with the plaster also you can have the X-rays visible showing you the fracture alignment. So that's how you do a modification of the plaster, because if there is an angulation in the X-ray, you can adjust it. But it's not a very transparent or very radiolucent, but definitely it is not a radio opaque object. It is a radiolucent, but comparative to an aluminum or synthetic cast, definitely it is much more radio opaque. Okay. So we have covered up this question. So you must be knowing the chemical reaction, the factor setting, the complications which you can see, and the material. Okay. We'll move on to the next question. So this is a question already Dr. John has already discussed, but I have to remind you, in ward rounds, definitely there will be a question from all of these things. Okay, it can be, who can identify this? It's a revision for you, Shinas.
Bowler ball.
Yeah. So here, this is a must question. It means every examiner will ask you, and they will ask you about the pulleys. So can you just say it again? A, B, C. What are these for?
A for calcaneum.
A for the calcaneum. Very good.
Or lower tibial.
Okay. Or for the lower tibia and the calcaneum. Very nice. Okay. B is for?
Tibia and distal femoral.
Okay. And C?
Changing the angle.
Changing the angle of what?
Foot.
So to reduce the equinus deformity. So here you can only see 3 pulleys, but sometimes it can be 4. So instead of B, you will have 2 pulleys there, one for the distal femur and for the upper tibia, you have separate pulleys to have a better tangent. But the principle is everything is same, so we won't spend much time on it. What is this for?
Kramer sling.
So it is mainly used for immediately after the injury, not as a definitive thing. Okay, so this will be usually kept for transport or shifting the patient or before taking an X-ray or other things. Okay, is there anything else we can be used commonly used? We don't use Kramer's. We normally use a aluminum. What is it not? Dev Majumdar. Anybody?
Yes,
what
sir.
is the name?
Sir, other uses of Kramer splint?
No. I'm saying that instead of Kramer wire, now most of the hospitals are relying on an aluminum splint with sponge coater. You know, I have seen it. It's much more easy, moldable, and less traumatic. Anybody anybody knows about it? So what is the way the limb is immobilized till the time you get an X-ray?
Thomas splint.
Thomas splint.
Thomas splint for the femur, for the upper part.
Upper limb, sir, we can give a POP slab.
Okay,
or we can also
POP
make
slab we normally don't give till the time you get the X-rays. No, we want the X-rays to be.
We have cardboard pieces wrapped in gauze.
Yeah. So cardboard is one way, because the problem with the cardboard is it moldable to the limb? No, the limb will be very deformed. So we have to keep the splint in the same way as the limb. We will not be able to align it well. So is there any other splint? Anybody knows about it? Srijit?
Alcathin we can use. It is aluminum. Alcathin.
Yeah. So SAM splint, the aluminum splint is very commonly used. SAM splint is an aluminum splint. So it is covered with sponge on the both sides, and you can easily mold to the limb. So these are the ways the patients are shifted to the X-ray. The plaster is not normally applied before taking the X-ray. The plaster is normally applied only after taking the X-ray. Okay. So we'll move on to the next question. Yeah. So this is we have already discussed. Who can say this? Harsh, what is this?
This is a Thomas splint, sir.
Very good. So it is a Thomas splint. So what is the? Yeah, what is the purpose?
Sir, purpose is for fracture shaft of femur stabilization, sir. For immobilization and stabilization in ward.
Okay, very good, very good. So that shows that you all are working hardly. I mean, it's very hard in the ward, not hardly. Okay. So what is the angle between the proximal ring and the inner bar?
120 degrees, sir.
Yeah, 120 degrees. So why you need 120 degree there?
Therefore, trochanteric to accommodate the greater trochanter, sir.
So anybody wants to change it? Anybody wants to change that answer or modify it a bit?
Sir, for the angle of the groin.
Exactly. So this 120 degree, what you are meaning here is that this is the inner part and this is the ring, and this is at a 120 degree, because if you see the groin area, the inguinal ligament is not 90 degrees. It is at an angle of 120. So you want the ring to be go as high as possible, and it is not possible in the medial part because it will touch the groin, the pubic area, and this has to be as high as possible. For that, it is to match with the inguinal ligament. And what you are saying about the trochanter is the span on this part. You can see there is a bulge there. That is to accommodate the, how will you measure the size? Okay, I want this because many times you may not be having all the sizes, but at least if I say X is the diameter of the thigh, so how much you should have the Thomas Flynn diameter? Shinas?
From crouch to heel plus 5 to 6 inches.
Yeah. So the lengthwise, it should be at least 6 inches long. Then only you can tie the limb to this thing. If the limb is already outside the Thomas Flynn, then you will not be able to give traction. So what sort of a traction you give in this?
It's
a fixed traction. So what you do is normally you tie a rope to the heel and this thing with the traction set and apply it to the small notch over here. Okay. So it's a fixed traction, and this is the trochanteric curve. And also, how much is the dia? That was the question I asked. Somebody has, okay, Dr. Udit, how will you decide on the diameter?
Sir, for diameter, we have to add 2 inches to the, we have to measure opposite side, which is normal side, plus adding the 2 inch into the normal side.
Very good. So you have almost answered all the questions from this. The why it is needed for transport and other facilities. What is the angle? That is 120. The length is almost 6 inches more than that of the limb, and 2 inches more than, because then only you will be easily able to put your limb inside. And the type of traction you give is a static traction. Very rarely we use this because this is happened in the World War scenario. But in ward rounds, you can expect all the historical questions, okay, like this. So the Thomas Flynn and other things. Okay, we'll go on to the next question. So what is one modification of this? Yeah. Anybody can answer this? Abhijit?
Fix.
It's a very classic modification of the Thomas Flynn.
That's a Tobruk splint.
Okay, so what is the modification in that?
Along with the Thomas Flynn, they also give a cast to stabilize the limb for transportation.
It's not exactly the same, but it is more of a modification. Then another modification is a Pearson modification, where you hinges on this so that the knee flexion is allowed. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So Tobruk is not exactly the modification of Thomas Flynn. Pearson is the answer we expect. Okay, because that is, you have the hinges here and you can flex the knee. Okay, Harsh. So what is a Pearson modification?
The knee flexion is allowed. There is a bend of around 30 degrees.
Okay.
So that he can flex.
Okay, very good. So we'll move on to the next question. That's question number 4. This you can see most of the hospital, especially if it's an old hospital. And this is a question I have to tell you. Once I appeared for my DNP exam, I was wondering who is going to ask these questions. Okay, the first question was asked to me is from this. Okay, so who is going to answer? Hemant Kumar. What are these known as?
So this is Balkan frame.
So what do you know? How do you know? Means why
This is pediatric femoral shaft fracture, sir.
So in that you need a Balkan frame. Okay, Dr. Udit Kothari, you want to say something about it?
Sir, this is a Balkan frame.
Okay.
the components of the Balkan frame, the upper side there is a trapezius, which is for the changing of the bed seat and the upper limb physiotherapy.
Very good.
The second pulleys, they are sir, I don't know.
Monkey chain.
And the last pulley.
Okay, so you can see multiple pulleys here. You can see something for the hand to hold on. So this is known as a monkey trapeze. So like the trapeze in the circus, no? It's a monkey trapeze. And you have upright beams and horizontal beams. And this is the advantage is that in early times, when you have a patient on a bed and in a wartime scenario, you don't have much people to care. So with the assistance of these pulleys, the patient can himself help the sister to change even the dressing. And you have many pulleys for that you can attach the different traction devices. Unlike presently, we don't normally operate on these patients, and in a war, you will not be able to operate all the patients in together. So how this name came? Dev Majumdar, how the Balkan name came in?
Sir, I don't know, sir.
Okay, anybody?
Sir, it was from
Balkan War.
Balkan War.
Yeah, so this became a common practice to have these beds because in a war, there's a World War I, Balkan War, and this is the question asked to me. So, and the examiner smiled at me, you know. So these are historic questions. I don't know whether you have it in your hospital, but you need to know, okay? So, what are these components? Who is Abhijit? Can you just say what is this?
Sir, for pulley to hold the upper limb.
So what is the name I have told you? Because these have got specific names and you need to satisfy the examiner. So that's why I'm asking you.
Monkey trapeze.
Monkey trapeze. Monkey trapeze. Is it trapeze jump? You have seen a trapeze jump. So monkey trapeze, okay, and uprights and horizontal bars and you know finally it is a Balkan related, war related question, okay? Balkan war and all this Balkan beams and things, okay? We'll move on to the next question. Okay, so who is going to answer this? So this is I'm just showing you a picture. Who is going to answer?
Sir,
Shyam.
Sir, this is Edinburgh University solution.
Okay, solution. Then still is got O and L, no?
Offline.
Offline. Who has answered that?
Navami.
Navami. Okay. So, what are the contents?
Boric acid or lime?
Boric acid.
It's there in the picture as well. So if you don't know this, you can just go in. Okay. So then, what is this thing? What is the mechanism of action?
It's a D-Slavi.
Okay. Okay. So when you say the mechanism of action, you should always say the chemical reaction. Okay. So the chemical reaction is?
Release of the nascent chloride.
Okay. So that helps in. So what are the uses?
So it is used to relieve slough.
Yeah. So basically you can see what is the content. It is an boric acid. So it's an acid, no? So all the alkali forming bacteria can be easily disinfected. So example.
Pseudomonas.
Very good. So when you have a Pseudomonas infestation, then one of the easy way is to make the area acidic. So instead of a use all any other reagent which commonly used.
Vinegar.
Yeah. So vinegar is another reagent which can be easily applied and can get rid of Pseudomonas. So same way when you have an acidic pH and the bacteria are thriving, you make it alkaline. How you make it alkaline? How you change the pH of urine? So sodium bicarbonate. Yeah. So how will you alkalize normally? You give sodium bicarbonate?
Saline.
So how will you? So you normally give vitamin C, ascorbic acid. So that it becomes acidic. And if you want to alkalize, you use Citralka syrup. So that it becomes alkaline. Okay, so these are one of the ways you can change. So this pH is very important. So when you know, when you're sending a gram stain or culture, also see if you can take the pH, and if you just change the pH, then the commensals can be easily eradicated. Okay. So whether we are using it so commonly now, Usol now, is it used in your hospital?
No, sir.
No.
No, yeah. So there are a lot of guidelines, like nice guidelines, strongly, doesn't recommend the use of these things. But it's a historic evidence. But still, for the exam, you need to know this. Okay, so Usol is one. So anybody knows about a Daikin's reagent? Dakish? Daikin solution. So along with Usol, this is another question which can be asked. Again,
glacial acetic acid is used in type 2.
Yeah, glacial acetic acid. But what is Daikin's solution or Daikin's reagent? D-A-I-K-I-N. Daikin. Anybody? Jijin?
Sodium hypochlorite.
Okay, very good. So it's a sodium hypochlorite solution. So that is the Daikin's reagent. So these dressing materials will be definitely asked for you. So along with this, you need to know the iodine concentration. So Avinash, can you explain what are the concentration of iodine in the scrub we use, the disinfecting solution we use, the antibiotic? Everywhere you are using iodine, no? So can you just say the concentration percentage?
For scrub purposes, we use 5% and
Scrub 7.5%.
Yeah. So for the scrub, we normally use 5% for our normal cleansing and all. So when you wiping up the wound and other thing. But when you for the scrub, it's much more concentrated. That is 7.5, and antibiotic means when you are using as an ointment, what is the concentration?
10%.
So 10%.
10%.
Remember 5, 7.5, and 10. So, but they will be asking you about this. Okay. So 5%. Yash Parikh, where you use 5%?
So 5% for the solution, sir, and 7.5 for the scrub, and ointment 10%, sir.
Okay. So what is the reagent release? Biochemical action, povidone iodine.
Sir, right? I cannot get it. So like.
Yeah.
For iodine is released.
Yeah. So in case of Usol solution, we know that it is a chloride. In case of Oxum, it is nascent oxygen. Okay. Oxum means nascent oxygen. And in case of an iodide solution, it is iodine. It's a radical, free radical. So that's why we have to keep that at least 1 or 2 minutes after application for its action. Okay. So we'll go on to the next question. So Manish Agarwal, so can you answer? It's a simple question.
Vacuum assisted closure.
Okay.
No, it's a
compartment pressure.
It's a Vicks intra-compartment.
Okay, very good. Yeah. So what is how will you make a diagnosis? How much pressure and above?
Pressure more than 30 mmHg.
Yeah, very good. So you have to specific 30 millimeters of mercury, not water. Okay. So although we in the syringe we are taking no saline or this thing, but the pressure we are actually taking from the manometer. So Vishnu Unikrishnan, what are the 6 P's we should see after application of any bandage or after a trauma? Vishnu? Simple question.
Pallor, paresthesia, pulselessness.
Yeah. Then?
Pain.
Very good. Pain.
Pain, pallor, pulselessness, paresthesia.
Okay.
Pain on passive stretch.
That's pain.
Pulselessness and
Pulselessness, very good. And finally,
Paralysis.
Paralysis. Very good, very good. So of these things, which is the first symptom usually happens? When the muscle is paralyzed means that the muscle is already dead.
Pain out of proportion, sir.
Very good. So in the post-op, when you go for the post-op rounds in the evening, and you know the patients will be having pain. So what do you give? You give a shot of paracetamol. And the patient is okay, then you go back. If the patient is not getting better, you will think about something like a tramadol plus Emicid. And after giving a shot of tramadol and Emicid, if the patient is still saying some pain, you should be watchful. First thing you must see is whether there is distal pulse. Okay, because the absence of pulse and the pain is just like an angina. So what is an angina? That is the ischemia of the heart muscle. The same things can happen in the limb, and the pain is so severe. And if you miss it, the next day you will be seeing a gangrene. So that's the reason. So pain out of proportion. So whenever you see your evening rounds in the patient, because the morning you are with the consultants, though anyway they are seeing it, but evening rounds in the most hospitals are taken by the postgraduate residents. So make sure you spend some time, inspect the limb, and ask for any increased pain or anything. And even after giving 2 shots of injections, if the pain is still persisting, then you have to be very careful and look for compartment syndrome and the pulse. Okay. So any other ways by which you can diagnose this?
So Mubarak-Wick method.
Yeah.
And another one I know, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Nigel-Lambert, you have anything to say about it?
No, sir.
Yeah. So now we have ready-made manometers, transducers. Like Stryker has got a transducer. You just need to insert it there. Then the manometer will show the display. And now reason one is that you don't need to non-permeable. It means you just need like a pulse oximeter. How the pulse oximeter? Just by the light. The same way you can have assessment. But the common one is a Stryker one. Many of the hospitals are using. It's a ready-made manometer. You just insert it, the pressure will be. It's much more easy. Okay, so these are the other ways you can see it. So just to elevate means this thing. If a patient comes to you with compartment syndrome, what do you do immediately? Shyam?
Sir, we do RICE application like rest, elevation.
First, release the pressure that constriction.
Yeah, one by one. Okay.
Sir, if the patient is on a cast or a plaster, that has to be removed immediately.
Very good, very good. Then immediately you have to slit open the plaster, including the cotton. That is the first thing you must do. Okay, very good. What's next?
So then we do elevate ice application.
So who all will say elevation is a good thing?
No, sir. Elevation above the heart level will decrease, will aggravate the situation.
Yeah. So that's something you must be very careful. So normally in all the post-op patients, what we do is elevation. We don't want the pressure to be increased. Okay, you don't want the edema to come in. So you always, if it is an upper limb surgery, you keep it in pillow sling. If it's a lower limb surgery, you keep it elevated on 2 or 3 pillows. But once you feel there is compartment syndrome, if you elevate further, already the blood supply is compromised. So the heart has to pump much more forcefully to an elevated limb. Okay, so once you feel there is compartment syndrome, then you should keep it ideally at the level of the heart. So that's the thing I want you to remind you. If it's not compartment syndrome, if it's just a post-op, always keep it elevated. But if there is compartment syndrome you are suspecting, you must do immediately keep it at the level of the limb at the level of the heart. Okay, is it clear, everyone? Avinash? Yeah. Yes, so what do you do next? You have kept it at the level of the heart. Then what do you do next? The pain is still persisting.
We will plan for fasciotomy.
Very good. So immediately you will send the blood investigations, things like that, and keep the patient under monitoring, and you will be preparing for fasciotomy. So if you feel a patient has already sets in compartment syndrome, and they are coming very late, maybe after 2 weeks. So will you do a fasciotomy at that time, or you will just leave it there?
No, sir. Reperfusion injury.
Yeah. So is it because of reperfusion injury?
No, sir. Chronic compartment syndrome, we have to wait and watch.
Okay. So the difference between a chronic compartment syndrome and acute compartment syndrome, becoming chronic, is different. The treatment for a chronic compartment syndrome also again fasciotomy, but you have to be very watchful. But if the patient has got an acute compartment syndrome and you have missed it and it is neglected, and the patient coming after a long time, and if you do a fasciotomy, what will happen is that, what is the end result of a compartment syndrome? The muscle ischemia and muscles are dead. And you are opening up a wound on top and it will become an easily get infected. So if it's a delayed or a missed compartment syndrome and the patient comes to you late, is it advisable to do a fasciotomy? Shivakant? Is it advisable to do a fasciotomy in that scenario?
No, sir.
So what will happen if you do a fasciotomy at that time?
Chance of infection will be high.
Yes, yes. So if you are doubtful and if you are feeling, okay, it's not too late, it's still worthwhile to do a fasciotomy. And in a chronic also you can do. But an acute which is missed, you have to be very careful, because what will happen is that all the dead muscles and things inside, once it get exposed to thing, it will get infected easily. Okay. So what is the end result of compartment syndrome, Avinash?
End result of compartment syndrome, it can lead to Volkmann ischemic contracture of muscles.
Very good, very good. So depending upon the depth of involvement, it can involve the nerves, blood vessels, and the muscles, and also VIC is the most common sequelae. And you need to know the different surgeries for VIC and other things. Okay. So we'll move on to the next question. So who's going to answer this?
Gallows traction.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a very common traction you can see in the hospital. So for what fractures you use this normally?
For pediatric shaft of femur.
Very good. So it's for a pediatric. So how till what age?
When it's
up to 2 years.
Yeah. So normally if you say pediatric, that's a problem. If you say for a 6-year-old kid, I am going to give a gallows traction, the patient will have likely to develop complications. So when you say the answer, it's good you say with the correct. So pediatric patients under the age of 2 years is an ideal candidate for this traction. Yeah. What is the most important complication for this?
Neurovascular.
Yeah. So whenever you have applied such a traction, you must inspect the limb at least 3 times a day. In the morning, definitely with the rounds with your consultant. Make sure before your lunch break, you see it again. And just before sleeping, again see it. Okay. So that's a must, because if the child will not be showing much of the symptom, because it's a young kid anyway, cranky with a fracture femur, you will not miss out. Okay. So immediately you should release the traction and keep the limb. And if it's too, the color is too dusky, remove all the traction apparatus. Okay. So how will you identify if the traction is sufficient?
The buttocks of the child should be touching the bed.
Yeah, yeah. So it should be just elevated. Just elevated. It not be too much elevated. That will give you undue pressure on the spine and other area. It should be just elevated. And this is a very nice way of immobilizing fracture femur. Okay. It's used for pediatric patients under the age of 2 years. Okay. So who is going to answer the any volunteers? Okay, Rasim. Rasim, you just joined, no? So can you answer this? Identify
Bond cement.
Yeah, it's a bond cement. Very simple, very simple. What are the components in the liquid?
Monomer.
So every monomer. Very good. Okay, what else?
Methyl methacrylate and NN dimethyl toluidine. Then initiator.
So toluidine is the initiator?
No, benzoyl
accelerator.
Benzoyl peroxide is the initiator. So you will never keep the initiator with the monomer. Then it will activate the reaction. So the initiator is always kept with the powder part. Okay.
Polymer.
Yeah. Okay. So what else is there in the liquid?
Stabilizing agent.
Stabilizing agent.
Yeah. So you have an activator as well as a stabilizer. So what is the stabilizer?
Ascorbic acid.
Hydroquinone.
So what do you mean by stabilizing? Stabilizing means that the monomer are not allowed to interact so closely so that it will activate. So you need to have a long chain like a quinone to hold on the free monomers and keep it apart. So that's what a stabilizer do. So hydroquinone is the stabilizer. Activator is DMPT, already there, orthotoluidine, and the initiator is benzoyl peroxide. So what are the radioemulsifiers you commonly use in this?
Barium sulfate.
Very good. Very good.
Zinc.
Zirconium dioxide, barium. So many of the bond cements are white in color, but sometimes it's when you have a revision surgery, it's very difficult to make out from the
coloring.
So some companies are always add some coloring agent. Okay, so like Palacos. What is the color of the Palacos cement? Anybody have seen?
Green.
Light green color.
Anybody? How it got a green color?
Chlorophyll.
Very good. The plants have green color because of the chlorophyll. The same thing. Okay. And if you are answering all these questions, definitely the examiner will be impressed and he will ask you more. It's not to make you. It wants to give you more marks. Okay. Then they will definitely ask you how you can increase the surface area, which all antibiotics should be added in the powder, which all should be added in the liquid, and which all can be added safely. Okay, any idea about these things, Jerry? Which all antibiotics? How you decide overall how the antibiotics should be?
Gentamicin,
vancomycin, gentamicin,
megamycin.
Yeah, all these antibiotics, most of the antibiotics which can be cement are heat stable because the cement activation will produce a lot of heat, and if it is heat labile, it will get inactive. So our first requirement for an antibiotic to be added is it should be heat stable. Okay. Then how will you decide whether to be added to the powder or to the liquid?
To the powder. To be added to the powder.
And it should be available in the powder form.
Yeah. So when you want to add to the powder form, when you are having an antibiotic in the powder form, for example, Vanco, so you mix it with the powder part. But if it's a liquid, it's good to mix with the liquid part. But whenever you add any antibiotic, it will weaken the cement. It will increase porosity. Okay, so there is a safety limit for all the antibiotics, how much you can add without causing much of the mechanical weakness. Okay, so we have identified it's a bond cement. What are the components in liquid? You have monomers and also activator, DMPT, and also stabilizer, hydroxyquinone, initiator, benzoyl peroxide is always with the powder. Then we have discussed about the opacifiers, zirconium and barium. Okay. Then we have discussed about the coloring agent and other ways of adding the antibiotic. Okay. We'll move on to the next question.
Can you repeat how to increase the surface area you were saying?
Yeah. So how will you, because you want to increase the surface area. So what is the shape where the surface area is maximum? Spherical. Exactly. So that is the reason most of the time you can see most of us will do a spherical, means we make beads and put in so that the surface area is, so that elution. Elution means the antibiotic is not just come out of the beads just like that. It slowly comes out. So if the elution capacity of any substructure, it will be maximum if it is spherical because the surface area is maximum. Okay, the elution will be having a different graphical representation. It will be maximum immediately, then it will become a linear like, then it become a plateau. So by normally a 6 weeks time, it becomes a plateau. Afterwards, it declines. So that's the reason whenever you keep some beads or something, you normally take it after 6 weeks because afterwards there is not much of elution. It is more or less like a foreign particle. So one way you can reduce the chances of this removal is by adding, instead of bone cement, something else. What do you add with antibiotic?
Stimulant, calcium sulfate.
Yeah, so what is stimulant? That's what I want you to discuss.
Stimulant, calcium sulfate.
Sulfate.
Stimulant.
So, calcium sulfate is another way you can. So you don't need to remove, you don't avoid this
calcium
part.
sulfate,
It dissolves by itself. Dissolves by itself. Okay. So we'll move on to the next question. So, being a resident, this is something everyone must know. There is no way you can say that I don't know about this. Okay. So this is a very simple question just to make some interest, and we'll discuss about the various traction points. Okay. So who is going to answer this?
So this is skeletal traction.
Okay.
This is proximal tibial skeletal traction.
Okay, it's a proximal tibial, upper tibial skeletal traction. Okay. Indication?
We use for shaft femur fracture.
Shaft femur, then?
Acetabulum fracture with protrusion.
Yeah. So whenever you want to give high, means when you want to increase the weight of the traction more than 10% or more than 5%, you need to have a skeletal traction. So the upper tibia is a very commonly done for the femur fractures as well as hip fractures or acetabular fractures. Okay. Yeah. What is the direction of this? Why you need to know about it?
Lateral to medial.
Yeah. Why is it so?
So we avoid inadvertent injury to the nerves.
Very good. Very good. So whenever you are in the vicinity of a nerve, make sure your entry is from the area of the nerve. So if you are doing a Dunlop traction, what is a Dunlop traction?
Dunlop traction is upper limb skeletal
traction. Supracondylar fracture, you have putting a pin in the olecranon. So where you put it from? Medial side or lateral side?
Medial to lateral.
Medial to lateral.
Exactly. So that's what I want you to tell you. Okay. Please see which is the structure under maximum problems. Then you put the pin from that area to the opposite area. So in case of upper tibia, you know it is a common peroneal nerve. So always put it from lateral to, yeah. So one common mistake everybody does is that when they want to put a pin in, they ask somebody or when your friend or somebody to hold the limb straight and put the pin in. And finally, when the patient is left like that, it won't be in that position. It will be slightly externally rotated. So it's good that you keep the limb not so much of neutral position, a slight external rotation, so the pin will not be almost like a parallel with the flow. Okay, so that's one way you can increase or you can make it more helpful for maintain. Okay, so how often you should do the dressing?
Every day.
Yeah, so one thing I want to tell you about this is whenever you have a pin and this exposed to the surface, means like a skin, make sure that it is not puckering. Okay, if it is a K-wire or it can be a pin or it can be a Lizaro wire or anything, whatever, the skin should not be stretched up. So whenever your skin is stretched up, the chances of infection is more. So always make some incision beside to make the skin free. Second thing is that make sure that if there is a collection inside, it should be able to come out. Because most of the time, the superficial infection starts because there will be some scab around and it obstructs the flow of the edematous fluid and later on get infected. So when you are keeping a dressing for K-Wear or Elixir or whatever, never make it so tightly around the gauze piece, not tightly around the pin, and it prevents the oozing. Okay, so that's you should be very careful about, and you should allow a free drainage of the fluid from inside. Okay, so what is the one contraindication for this?
Local infection.
Local infection.
Ligament injury.
Yeah,
Ligament injury.
Very good, very good. So how much weight you can have with the skeletal traction?
10% of body weight.
Yeah, 10%. So you should know the entry site. Anybody for upper tibia?
2 centimeter lateral and medial.
Yeah, entry site.
Lateral and distal.
Yeah. So location?
So 2 centimeter lateral and distal to the tibial tuberosity.
Very good. So it should be below the tibial tuberosity. You don't want to be near. Same way for the distal femur. Varsha? For the distal femur, it's not very commonly done, but if you know, you can answer it.
The superior pole of patella.
Okay.
And the line intersecting the head of fibula.
Very good.
But
so
on the
that
medial,
is
sir, actually in Stewart, it is written, we have to insert from lateral only. But the neurovascular structure is medially. So what should we tell the examiner?
So the problem is that have you really put a pin from medially? It's very difficult for the distal femur. You understand? Yeah. So in the real-time scenario for a distal femur to insert from the medial, it will not be that easily. Okay. So that's the reason you can put it from the lateral side, but I will be careful. You have to say something like that. Okay. Because in the practical scenario, from medial, because the other limb will be on the same side.
Yes.
And you will not get a correct angle. Okay.
Yes.
So what I tell my residents is that, or I tell you is that you can keep a bolster under. Okay. And you can insert from the medial side as well. But here, then you cannot have the reference of upper pole of tibia and upper pole of patella and the line of the fibula. Here you have to take the measure from the medial joint line. So how far from the medial joint line?
Around 5 centimeter above the medial joint line.
Yeah, at least 3 centimeter above. Okay. Okay. So one common mistake everybody does when you put a distal femur traction is that, so when you have a upper shaft fracture of the femur and you want to put a pin in the distal femur, so that you want to keep the traction on the femur alone. So that is one indication for distal femur. So for that, you normally keep the knee flexed. But have you ever tried after putting a pin in the distal femur, flexing the knee? It will not be easy. Why? If you have put a pin in extension and try to flex the knee, what will you see normally?
So generally we have to go through the vastus.
Exactly. Because the vastus will not allow the knee to flex because it will tether on the pin. So you have to keep the limb exactly what position you want to keep, then only insert the pin, especially in distal femur, because it's a moving area. Upper tibia is not that moving. You don't need to really worry about. But if you expect some movement in that area, you have to keep it. If you want the knee to be at 90 degree, make sure that your pin insertion is at what degree? 90 degree exactly. But if you keep in extension and you pass the pin in, and if you try to flex, you will not be able to flex it. Okay? Is it clear?
Okay.
Is it clear? Okay.
Sir, please tell the contraindication.
Yeah. What is the contraindication?
The contraindication, can it be osteoporotic bone because we are giving skeletal traction? Can the bone be?
You have to be very careful. Okay. Then what else?
Fracture line extending.
Yeah, if there is an if it is in the trauma. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, there was some problem with the connection. Okay, so we'll move to the next question. So whenever you feel you're tired and you don't want to continue, you can interrupt me. So anyway, maybe two questions maximum I will go. Okay. So what is the chief constituent and what are its commonly concentration? Well, yeah, who is going to answer? It's a chlorhexidine solution.
Gluconate.
Yeah, very good.
2.4%.
2000 HT.
Okay. So what is its effect in low concentration?
Antiseptic.
It is antiseptic. Okay. And then high concentrations?
Antibacterial.
Yeah. So most of this concentration, for example, when you're using a hand scrub, the percentage of chlorhexidine is 0.5%. Okay. And it is with 70 to 80% of alcohol. So that's the normal concentration. But when you use a chlorhexidine solution, the solution concentration is how much? Naomi?
Disinfectant. 2% and 4%.
2%, 4%.
So it is 2% when you use this. But when you use it for a scrub, it is 4%. Okay. So when you're using it 4%, it is bactericidal. It kills the bacteria, and also it lies the bacteria as well. But other one is just prevents the proper. Yeah. So okay. So in 2% it is antiseptic, as Naomi has rightly said, and in 4% it is bactericidal. So chlorhexidine is widely used everywhere. So you should know about what are the concentrations and the uses. But for the hand scrub, what is the concentration normally?
0.5.
Yeah. So one thing I want to remind you, when you don't have the scrub solution, don't use the hand scrub because the concentration is inadequate. We want bactericidal activity. And whenever you are using an iodine solution, it has to be dried up for the maximum effectiveness. Okay. So the concentration 2% is antiseptic and 4% is Rakesh? Okay, very good. So we'll go on to the last question. Mahesh, you want to answer this?
Hip spica, sir.
Okay.
Double hip spica.
Okay. So where you should extend maximum? Or where you should end normal?
Level of nipple. And
yeah, why?
So it gives structural support. Ribs will give structural support.
Very good, very good, very good. Okay, very good. So indications?
Fracture shaft of the femur. DDH, developmental disorder.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll move on to the last part of the question. What is a plaster cast syndrome?
The duodenum is entrapped between the superior mesenteric and
compression of superior mesenteric.
So it is a compartment syndrome. Something like a duodenum get entrapped there and it can give you trouble. Okay. So you want to answer, ask me any questions from the topics which we have discussed?
Sir, one thing you said that to make a urine alkaline, what constituent we give?
Yeah. So for the urine, if you want to make it alkaline, you use Citralka scrub. Citralka. So what it does is that it alkalizes the urine. And when you want to make it acidic, you just give them vitamin C. So ascorbic acid. So what I'm saying is that when you're having a pus, the first thing you must see, my prof used to say, you must sniff it. So what he says that if you sniff and if it's a very foul smelling, definitely it is not Staph aureus. Okay. So what it is? It can be a gram negative. It can be a gram negative or it can be a anaerobic. But in a superficial wound, you don't expect anaerobic, so most likely a gram-negative. So without doing a gram stain and culture, you have done the first part. Then you see the color. If it is green, if it is golden yellow, or what is the color, then it helps you. But normally the culture takes how many days? 3 days time, no? So if you can identify these things, this characteristic of the pus, then you can right away start the right antibiotic. Okay. So if you are seeing a golden yellow color, okay, and you all know that the patient is already on many antibiotics before, and there is no foul smelling, then the commonest is
Staph aureus.
Staph. So you know, because the patient has been already treated in many places, then the chances that the Staph aureus is
MRSA, methicillin
MRSA. So you know it's a MRSA, most likely an MRSA. Okay, so what will you give?
We can give teicoplanin.
The drug of choice for MRSA.
Vancomycin.
Problem is vancomycin, only IV preparation. The patient is there with you in the OPD. So what do you give? Linezolid. So before the culture report comes, which normally takes 3 days time, you have already started the right antibiotic just by sniffing and other things. So is it good? It's good. And you must know this. Okay. So that's the reason I said you should know the pH. Everything should be supportive. Okay. You should know the pH. You should know the smell. You should know the color. Okay. So these things helps you to identify the organisms before the actual report comes in, because the report takes time. Okay. Any other questions?
Sir, Hammersmith circumference, how should we say, sir? In the opposite limb or affected limb circumference?
So if it is 2 edematous, what is the purpose? It should be, your limb should go in freely. Okay, if it is 2 edematous, you should take from that limb only, because at least you should have 2 inches all around so that the limb goes in. If it is not that badly swollen, why the other whoever has answered it from the opposite side without much of traumatizing that area? But the concept is, if the limb is badly swollen, you take from that limb only, because that limb has to go in. Okay, and you should have a 2 inch of space all around. Okay, is it clear?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Sir, one most important complication of Gallows skin traction, what we should say, sir? Most important complication.
So the most important, see, it can be neurovascular problem. Okay. So of the neurovascular, which is most important is vascular. Why? Because after 6 hours, it is not reversible. But neurologically, definitely it is important, but it is reversible. So to me, the most threatening one is vascularity.
And sir, also in books, they have said that we have to abduct the limb after 3 weeks, like that. When the child is in Gallows skin traction.
Yeah.
So sir, what's the any protocol is there for that, sir?
Yeah. So that different institutes have different protocols. So I won't be able to say this is the only way. Okay, so if you see the protocols made in Vellore is different from what you have in John Hopkins. Okay, in AIMS they have a different protocol. So I have to tell you, whenever you answer questions like this, and always watch the eyes of the examiner. Okay, and if you are saying, or you can quote. Okay, so whenever I say, for example, I say, what is meant by a surgical site infection? Dev Majumdar.
Yes, sir.
So what do you mean by surgical site infection?
So infection over the incision scar or deeper, it is superficial or deep, but infection around the surgical sites.
Yeah. So if you answer this, is it correct? It is correct, but it is not really correct. So that's the reason. For an infection, you have different guidelines. A cellulitis is not considered as infection. One stitch abscess is not considered as infection. Okay, if it is happened after 90 days, it is not considered as infection. Because that's the reason you need to have guidelines. So whenever I am asking you a question, what do you mean by surgical site infection? My answer will be, sir, according to CDC guidelines, a surgical site infection is considered. So similarly, when somebody is asking you, okay, how the abduction should be. Then you have to say, according to this criteria or this hospital policy, this is the way. So that is one way you get off from that. Is it clear now?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So it's already late. I think we'll wind up. Thank you. Any more questions?
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sir, when will be the next class?
Next week. Actually, today we supposed to have another session. Unfortunately, sir had a problem, so that's why I joined him.
Sir, we are planning for a session by Gogomar, sir. Depending on when sir is free, we'll be arranging that before the scheduled next week session.
Yeah.
Thank you for the wonderful session.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Hope everyone
Thank you, sir.
Actually utilized it.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Divya. Thank you, Divya. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
sir.
Thank you,
sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Srinivas. Bye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.